Lila was only 9 years old, but she had always been curious about the world around her. She loved asking questions, exploring hidden corners, and discovering things that others often overlooked. Her life had been quiet on Earth, filled with school and small adventures in her neighborhood, but nothing could have prepared her for the incredible journey she was about to face. One day, through a strange turn of events she still did not fully understand, she found herself far from home, in a place that seemed like it was taken straight out of a dream, or perhaps a story that had never been written. She had been transported to a world unlike anything she had ever imagined. The first thing Lila noticed was the sheer size of everything. The buildings were tall and shining, made from materials that looked like glass and metal, yet seemed almost alive, reflecting the light and unusual colors. Strange machines moved on their own, gliding silently through the air while creatures with shining eyes and elegant forms walked around her. She quickly realized that she was in a place where humans were very small and very different from the beings who lived here. It wasn't long before Lila met the aliens. They were taller than any human she had ever seen, their skin shimmering in shades of silver and blue. Their movements were smooth and precise, almost like they were dancing as they walked. They wore clothing that sparkled like stars, and their voices rang with clarity, echoing through the hallways. But when they saw Lila, they laughed. Their laughter was loud and musical, yet full of disbelief. They couldn't believe that such a small, fragile human girl had wandered into their city. "Look at her," one of them said, tilting its head. "She is no taller than a child of 5. Can she even survive here?" Lila felt a shiver run down her spine. The laughter was sharp, but she didn't let it stop her. Instead, she took a deep breath and looked around, her curiosity stronger than her fear. She noticed how the aliens moved, how they handled their strange devices, and how the energy flowed through their city. Even though they mocked her, she paid attention. She had learned long ago that sometimes the people, or creatures, who underestimate you also reveal the most important secrets every day. Lila observed them quietly. She watched how they communicated, how they built things, and how they interacted with their environment. The aliens spoke in a language that sounded like music, full of highs and lows that danced in the air. At first, Lila couldn't understand the words, but she learned to watch their gestures and expressions. She discovered patterns in their behavior, noticing that some actions always led to certain results. Every small observation was a puzzle piece in the big picture she was beginning to see. The aliens continued to tease her, often calling her clumsy or foolish. "Why does a human even try?" they would ask. "Your hands are too small, your mind too limited. You will never understand our ways." At first, Lila felt the sting of their words. It was not easy to be laughed at by creatures so tall, so elegant, and so intelligent. But slowly she realized that their words were not important. What mattered was what she could learn from watching them. If she ignored their mockery and focused on what she could see and understand, she might find a way to prove herself. She spent her days exploring the city, sometimes hiding behind tall structures to watch without being noticed. She learned to move quietly, slipping between shadows, and even started experimenting with the devices she found. Many of them were too complex for her to use, but she tried anyway, pressing buttons, turning levers, and seeing what would happen. Occasionally, sparks would fly, or a small light would turn on, and she would feel a small thrill of success. Each tiny success gave her confidence and reminded her that even though she was young and small, she could make a difference if she didn't give up. One of her favorite places to explore was a quiet garden in the heart of the alien city. Unlike the rest of the bustling metropolis, the garden was calm and peaceful, filled with plants that glowed faintly in the dark. The aliens rarely came here, which meant she could study them without their constant laughter. She would watch them, practice their skills, or discuss matters quietly, always taking mental notes. She noticed how they moved with precision and grace, how their tools seemed almost alive, and how they could make complicated things look easy. It fascinated her, and she began to imagine what it would be like to do the same. Despite her small size, Lila learned to adapt. She realized that she could use her human strengths, curiosity, determination, and cleverness to navigate this world. She may not have had the aliens' height or strength, but she had something they didn't expect: patience, and persistence. While they relied on power and speed, she relied on observation and understanding. Slowly, she began to feel that maybe, just maybe, she could find a place here, even among those who had laughed at her. By the end of her first month in the alien city, Lila had changed. She was no longer the scared, unsure human girl who had arrived. She had grown more confident, more aware, and more determined. She had learned that being small did not mean being weak, and being young did not mean being incapable, and deep inside she felt a spark of hope. A feeling that maybe one day she could prove herself to the aliens who had mocked her, showing them that even a human child could achieve greatness if she dared to try. And so, even though the aliens continued to laugh and tease, Lila kept observing, learning, and exploring. Every day brought new discoveries, new challenges, and new opportunities. Her small size and young age were no longer weaknesses. They were advantages in ways the aliens could not yet see. With each passing day, she became more ready for the moment when she would finally show them that she was capable of more than they had ever imagined. One morning, while exploring a quiet corner of the alien city that she had never ventured into before, Lila stumbled upon a corridor unlike any other. The walls were covered in strange symbols that glowed softly, and the air smelled faintly of flowers she had never seen. The corridor led to a hidden chamber, one that seemed untouched by time and forgotten by the aliens who had laughed at her so often. Her heart raced with excitement and curiosity. Lila felt that there was something important waiting for her in this secret place, something the aliens had overlooked or hidden deliberately. As she stepped inside the chamber, her eyes widened. In the center of the room, resting on a pedestal made of crystalline light, lay an object that seemed to hum with energy. It was a sword, unlike any she had ever seen. Its blade shimmered with a silver glow that shifted through the colors of the rainbow, and intricate patterns were etched into the metal, sparkling faintly as if alive. The hilt was decorated with gems that pulsed with soft light, and the entire sword seemed to radiate a quiet, powerful energy. She realized immediately that this was no ordinary weapon. This was something extraordinary, something legendary. Lila remembered the stories the aliens had whispered in passing, tales of a weapon called the Philosopher's Sword. According to legend, the sword could only be lifted by someone truly worthy. Those who tried and failed were said to be shown their weaknesses, while those who succeeded gained knowledge and power far beyond ordinary beings. Lila felt a mix of fear and excitement. She was small, young, and human, yet something inside her told her she might have a chance. She had spent weeks observing the aliens, learning their ways and their patterns. Perhaps her careful attention and determination could help her succeed where others had failed. The aliens, as usual, were arrogant about the sword. When they noticed her near it, they laughed loudly. "Do you think you, a human child, can touch the sword?" one of them asked, tilting its head with amusement. "It will never allow it. Only the worthy may hold it, and you are not even close." Others joined in, their voices echoing through the chamber, mocking her size and youth. Lila felt a flicker of nervousness, but she pushed it aside. She had learned by now that the opinions of others mattered little if she stayed focused and careful. She approached the sword slowly, studying every curve, every line, every marking etched into its surface. She noticed that the patterns on the blade matched some of the glowing symbols on the walls, almost as if they were part of a puzzle. Her curiosity turned into determination. If she could understand the symbols and the sequence they represented, maybe she could unlock the sword's secret. She reached out her small hands and traced the symbols lightly, feeling the energy of the sword respond to her touch. A faint warmth spread through her fingers, as if the sword itself was acknowledging her presence. For hours Lila experimented. She moved the sword slightly, tested different grips, and studied the way light reflected from the crystals on its hilt. She remembered every little detail she had observed in the alien city, the patterns in their machines, the way they combined logic and creativity, and the precision of their movements. Slowly, she began to notice how the sword reacted to her approach, how the hum changed slightly when she touched certain symbols, and how it seemed to respond to patience and careful observation rather than brute strength. The aliens watched her quietly, their laughter replaced by curiosity. They had never seen a human, let alone a child, approach the sword with such care and attention. Many had tried before using their strength and skill, only to fail and be rejected by the sword. But Lila was different. She was small, yes, but she had something else. An unshakable focus and a deep respect for the object before her. She did not rush or demand the sword obey her. Instead, she studied it, learned from it, and allowed herself to become part of the rhythm and logic it seemed to follow. As the hours passed, she discovered a sequence of movements that made the sword vibrate gently in her hands. It was as if it was testing her, gauging her patience and intelligence. She remembered how the aliens had mocked her size and strength, and she realized that these were not the qualities that mattered here. What mattered was understanding, persistence, and the ability to remain calm even when the task seemed impossible. Lila's mind worked like a puzzle, connecting patterns, testing theories, and adjusting her approach. By the end of the day, she felt a strange connection with the sword. It no longer seemed like a cold, untouchable object. Instead, it felt almost alive, as if it was responding to her efforts and recognizing her worth. She had learned to listen to its subtle signals, to follow its rhythm, and to respect its power. And in doing so, she began to believe that perhaps she was capable of lifting it, despite what the aliens said. That night, as she rested in the quiet garden she had discovered earlier, Lila reflected on what she had learned. The aliens had mocked her for being small, but she realized that her size allowed her to approach challenges differently. They had underestimated her curiosity, her patience, and her ability to observe carefully. For the first time, she felt truly confident that she could succeed where others had failed. She was no longer just a human child in a world of aliens. She was a student of their ways, a thinker, and a learner. The next morning, she returned to the chamber, ready to try again. She approached the sword with determination, her heart steady, and her mind focused. The aliens were there, as expected, watching her with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. But Lila no longer cared about their opinions. She had discovered something more important than their laughter or doubt: the power of persistence, observation, and understanding. Lila's journey with the Philosopher's sword had only begun, but already she had learned valuable lessons. She realized that greatness was not measured by size, age, or strength, but by patience, intelligence, and the courage to keep trying even when others doubted you. And as she placed her hands on the sword once more, she felt a quiet excitement building inside her. Something extraordinary was about to happen, and she was ready to face it no matter what the aliens said. The next morning, Lila returned to the chamber, her small hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from excitement. She had spent the night thinking about the Philosopher's sword, imagining what it would feel like to lift it, and how the aliens would react if she succeeded. She reminded herself that patience, observation, and careful attention were her greatest strengths. The sword was not just a weapon, it was a test, a challenge that required understanding rather than strength. Lila took a deep breath and stepped closer. As she approached, the aliens noticed her again. Their eyes widened in disbelief, and some of them laughed nervously. "She's trying again," one whispered to another. "Does she really think she can succeed?" They had seen many beings try and fail. Even the most skilled and powerful aliens could not lift the sword. And now, a small human child was standing before it, determined and confident. The room buzzed with tension. Lila ignored them, focusing on the sword, feeling its subtle vibrations and glowing patterns. She began to study the blade more closely, noticing tiny details she had missed before. The inscriptions along the edge were not random. They formed a sequence, a puzzle that required careful attention. She traced each line with her fingers, whispering the shapes and sounds aloud to herself. Slowly, the symbols began to make sense. It was as if the sword responded to her focus and concentration. When she touched the right patterns in the correct order, it hummed softly, almost like it was encouraging her. The aliens watched silently, no longer mocking but curious. Lila had done something they had not expected. She was small, yet she had something far greater than size or strength: determination, intelligence, and the ability to learn from observation. They could see that she was different, that she approached the challenge in a way they had never seen before. The room felt charged, as if something extraordinary was about to happen. For hours, Lila experimented with the sword. She shifted her hands slightly, adjusted her stance, and tried different sequences of movements. Each time, the sword responded differently, humming, glowing, or vibrating in subtle ways. Lila realized that patience was the key. Rushing or forcing it would not work. The sword required understanding, not power. She thought about all the time she had spent watching the aliens, learning their patterns and habits. Every observation, every careful study was now helping her unlock the sword's secret. As she continued, she began to feel a connection with the sword. It was no longer a distant object of legend. It felt alive, aware of her presence and her intentions. She could sense its energy, like a heartbeat beneath her fingers. It was testing her, measuring her focus, and recognizing her determination. The sword was not rejecting her. It was waiting for her to prove herself worthy. Lila smiled quietly to herself. She understood now that the challenge was not about strength, but about patience, intelligence, and respect. The aliens started to whisper among themselves. "She is human, yet she approaches it differently than any of us," one said softly. Another nodded. "Her hands are small, but her mind is sharp. Perhaps she is worthy in ways we cannot measure." Their tone had changed from mocking to cautious. Admiration. Lila did not notice their whispers. She was completely absorbed in the task, following the sword's subtle signals and patterns. Hours turned into the afternoon, and Lila's persistence began to pay off. She found a sequence that caused the sword to vibrate more strongly, a response that told her she was on the right track. Her excitement grew, but she stayed calm, remembering the lessons she had learned about patience and focus. One wrong move could disrupt the delicate balance, and she did not want to rush. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and visualized the sword's energy flowing through her hands. When she opened her eyes, she felt ready. Carefully, she positioned her hands on the hilt, aligning them exactly as she had practiced. She pressed her fingers lightly against the glowing patterns and lifted her arms slowly. For a moment, nothing happened, and she held her breath. Then, almost imperceptibly, the sword began to rise. Slowly, gently, it lifted from the pedestal, shimmering with radiant light. Lila's eyes widened in awe. She had done it. She had lifted the Philosopher's sword. The room was silent. The aliens stared in disbelief, their mouths slightly open. They had never seen anyone, human or alien, accomplish such a feat. Lila's small hands held the glowing sword with ease, and her heart pounded with excitement and pride. She realized that all her patience, observation, and determination had led to this moment. She had proven that greatness was not measured by size or strength, but by focus, intelligence, and courage. As she held the sword, a strange feeling washed over her. It was as if the sword itself was acknowledging her worth. A soft glow radiated from the blade, illuminating the chamber in colors that seemed to dance and shift. Lila felt a connection with it, a sense of understanding and harmony. She realized that the sword had tested her and she had passed. She had earned its respect and proven herself worthy in a way that even the most skilled aliens had not. The aliens, now silent and respectful, stepped closer to observe. Their eyes reflected a mixture of astonishment and admiration. "We underestimated her," one said quietly. Another nodded. "She is not just a human child. She is a thinker, a learner, and a being of great potential." Lila, still holding the sword, looked around at them. She felt no fear, only quiet confidence. She had faced their mockery, overcome their doubts, and accomplished what many had thought impossible. In that moment, Lila realized something important. The challenge had never been about the sword alone. It had been about belief in herself, patience, and the ability to stay focused in the face of doubt. The aliens had tested her indirectly by mocking her and underestimating her abilities, but she had risen above their laughter. She had proven that even a small human girl could achieve greatness with determination and understanding. As the sun began to set in the alien city, the chamber glowed softly with the sword's light. Lila carefully placed it back on the pedestal, but she knew that this was only the beginning. The sword had accepted her, and she had accepted the challenge it represented. From this day forward, she would be seen differently, not as a small human child, but as someone capable of understanding, learning, and achieving extraordinary things. Lila left the chamber that day with a sense of pride and accomplishment she had never known. The aliens, now silent and respectful, gave her a nod of acknowledgement. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had taken the first step toward proving herself in a world that had once seemed impossible to navigate. Her courage, curiosity, and determination had brought her to this moment, and she was ready for whatever came next. The next morning, Lila returned to the chamber with a sense of calm determination. Holding the philosopher's sword the day before had changed her. She felt a strange connection to it, almost like the sword was no longer just an object, but a companion guiding her steps. The aliens who had mocked her relentlessly now watched from a distance, their expressions shifting from amusement to cautious curiosity. Lila ignored their stares, her focus entirely on the task ahead. She had already proven she could lift the sword, but now she wanted to understand it fully. The sword pulsed gently in her hands as if sensing her intentions. She realized that the previous day had only been the first step. There was more to discover, more lessons to learn, and she felt a thrill of excitement. Carefully, she studied the patterns etched on the blade, noticing new details that seemed to appear only when she held it with patience and concentration. Each symbol, each curve, seemed to tell a story, revealing ancient knowledge in a language of light and energy that she was beginning to understand. Hours passed as Lila experimented with the sword. She moved it in slow arcs, traced the patterns with her fingers, and observed how it responded to her touch. Every movement required thought, every action demanded patience. At times the sword would glow brighter, as if approving her approach, and at other times it would dim slightly, signaling a need to adjust. Lila realized that the sword was not just testing strength, it was testing understanding, intelligence, and harmony with the energy it contained. The aliens grew silent as they watched. They had never seen anyone interact with the sword this way. Their own attempts had been focused on power, on showing strength and skill, but Lila had approached it differently. She had approached it with respect, with observation, and with patience. Her small hands and careful movements seemed to unlock something within the sword that brute force could never reach. The aliens whispered among themselves, amazed that such a small human girl could achieve what they had thought impossible. At one point, the sword vibrated gently and emitted a soft hum. Lila's eyes widened as she realized that the vibrations were not random. They were a form of communication. She began to sense patterns in the hum, matching them with the symbols on the blade and the walls of the chamber. Slowly, a picture emerged in her mind. The sword was revealing its history, its purpose, and its connection to the world around her. Lila felt her heart swell with wonder. She was witnessing knowledge that had been hidden for centuries, and she was the first human to truly understand it. The hours turned into evening, and the chamber glowed with the soft light of the sword. Lila felt a sense of achievement unlike anything she had ever known. She had not only lifted the sword, but had begun to understand it in a way the aliens could not. The chamber seemed alive with energy, responding to her focus and determination. She realized that the sword had accepted her, not just as someone strong enough to lift it, but as someone worthy of learning from it, someone capable of understanding its deeper purpose. The aliens, now silent and respectful, stepped closer. Their expressions showed admiration mixed with awe. "We underestimated her," one of them said quietly. "She is not just a human child. She is a thinker, a learner, a being of great potential." Another nodded. "She has shown patience and intelligence we did not expect. She has connected with the sword in a way none of us could. Lila looked at them and smiled quietly. She felt no fear, only quiet confidence. She had proven herself, and she knew this was only the beginning of her journey. By nightfall, Lila carefully placed the sword back on its pedestal. She felt a sense of completion, but also anticipation. The sword had taught her an important lesson, that true power comes not from strength alone, but from understanding, patience, and respect. She realized that the journey was not just about lifting the sword, it was about learning from it, about discovering her own potential, and about proving to herself that she could overcome challenges that seemed impossible. As she left the chamber, the aliens no longer laughed or mocked her. Instead, they nodded in acknowledgement, their respect evident in their eyes. Lila walked through the glowing city, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had faced their doubts, conquered their challenges, and discovered a new strength within herself. The city no longer seemed intimidating. It felt like a place full of opportunities, a place where she could continue learning, growing, and proving herself in ways no one had imagined. That night, as she rested in the quiet garden, Lila thought about everything she had learned. She understood that being small and human did not mean being weak. Intelligence, patience, and courage could overcome even the greatest obstacles. And most importantly, she realized that mockery and doubt from others did not define her worth. It was her actions, her determination, and her willingness to learn that truly mattered. Lila closed her eyes, feeling a quiet excitement for the adventures yet to come. The next morning, Lila awoke with a sense of determination stronger than ever. The philosopher's sword had revealed some of its secrets to her, but she knew there was more to discover. Today she would show the aliens, and perhaps even herself, just how far she had come. She returned to the chamber, her hands steady and her mind focused. The aliens, now silent and respectful, watched her approach. No words of mockery came this time. Instead, there was curiosity, awe, and even a hint of fear in their eyes. Lila stepped inside, her gaze fixed on the sword. It pulsed softly, almost as if it recognized her presence. She felt a sense of harmony, as if the sword and her own energy were aligned. This time, she did not simply lift the sword. She studied it, traced the symbols, and followed its subtle signals. The hum it emitted seemed like a language, and Lila had learned to listen. Each vibration, each glow was a message that guided her hands and mind. She realized that the sword was teaching her, and she was ready to learn everything it had to offer. Hours passed as she explored its mysteries. She discovered patterns in the symbols, sequences that revealed knowledge about the universe, energy, and balance. She learned how the sword had been created by beings long before the aliens, meant to guide, teach, and reward those who were worthy. Lila felt her understanding grow with every passing moment. She was no longer just a human child in a world of aliens. She was a student of ancient wisdom, a learner who had unlocked secrets thought impossible to reach. The aliens watched in silence, their eyes wide with wonder. They had never seen anyone interact with the sword this way. Their attempts had relied on power and experience, yet they had failed. Lila's success was not about strength, it was about understanding, patience, and careful attention. The room seemed to shimmer with energy, reflecting the new respect the aliens had for her. "She is remarkable," one whispered. "Her mind is brilliant. Her courage and focus are extraordinary." At one point, the sword glowed brighter than ever before. Lila felt warmth and energy flow through her hands, a sensation that filled her with awe and wonder. She realized that she had not only lifted the sword and understood its patterns, but she had connected with it in a way no one else had. It was as if the sword recognized her determination, patience, and intelligence. It had chosen her, not because she was strong, but because she was worthy of its knowledge and guidance. The alien stepped forward, no longer hiding their admiration. They bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that Lila had never expected. "You have proven yourself worthy," one of them said. "We doubted a human child, yet you have unlocked secrets that none of us could. Your courage, intelligence, and patience have shown us a new way of understanding. Lila smiled quietly, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had faced their mockery, their doubts, and their disbelief, and she had triumphed. As the sun set over the alien city, Lila carefully placed the sword back on its pedestal. She understood that her journey was not finished. There were still mysteries to uncover and lessons to learn. But she also knew that she had reached a turning point. The aliens would no longer see her as a small, weak human child. They would see her as someone capable, intelligent, and extraordinary. She had proven that even the smallest and youngest among us could achieve greatness with determination, patience, and courage. Walking through the city that evening, Lila felt a new sense of confidence. The buildings no longer seemed intimidating, the machines no longer overwhelming. She had faced the greatest challenge the city had to offer, and had succeeded. The aliens who had once mocked her now nodded with respect, some even offering words of encouragement. Lila realized that respect and recognition were not given. They were earned through effort, patience, and determination. That night, as she rested in the glowing garden, Lila reflected on her journey. She thought about the challenges, the mockery, and the doubts she had faced. She remembered the quiet determination that had carried her through, the careful observation that had guided her hands, and the patience that had allowed her to understand the sword's secrets. She realized that these lessons would stay with her forever, guiding her in everything she did. Lila closed her eyes, feeling a sense of peace and excitement for the future. She had proven herself in a world that had seemed impossible to navigate. She had connected with something greater than herself, learned secrets that few could ever understand, and